Tonight, as the world spins, so does the fate of the Iran war.
It's a very strong memorandum of understanding.
Trump calls off more strikes with claims of an agreement. Plus, the president bows to pressure over his pick to run America's intelligence, while the House rejects extending his spy powers.
It is shameful and it is very, very dangerous.
Also,
maybe, we'll just host weekly fights between people in politics.
$60 million and 7 agencies are needed to stage Trump's birthday fight night, while someone etches 8647 at the National Mall. And editing history. The president is reportedly pushing Congress to void his impeachments. Live at the table, Scott Jennings, Bakari Sellers, Carla Sands, Xochitl Hinojosa, and Max Boot. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do. Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. President Trump is backing off his new threats to strike Iran after a supposed breakthrough in talks on a potential deal to end the war.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents. We should get done over the next few days. The documents are in pretty final shape, so we'll see. We'll see. Very good. Should be done. That should be done pretty quickly.
But we have heard this before, and the president is making some big new claims here. He says that the final points have been approved, that Iran's supreme leader supports this deal, that Tehran has agreed to never have a nuclear weapon, and that it could be signed as soon as this weekend. Also, he says the Strait of Hormuz will reopen once the ink dries. However, Iran's foreign ministry is pushing back tonight, calling reports of a final agreement speculation. A spokesperson adds a large part of the text had already been finalized, but the U.S. kept changing its position. He said that Iran will not compromise on its red lines and reiterates it has not reached a final decision on any agreement. And if that's not enough for you to tell you where things stand, at least from an Iranian perspective, here is how Trump described the great settlement, as he called it earlier today.
You said this was just a concept of that agreement. So is this just essentially setting the stage for deeper talks on nuclear?
It's a very strong memorandum of understanding that is a little conceptual.
A little conceptual, one that Iran continues to say is not quite there yet. And Max, I don't know. I mean, my sort of read of the tea leaves of all of that everybody is saying is that maybe they have agreed on a lot of things. But it's always the last bit, maybe the last 5 or 10%, that's the hardest stuff to get through. And maybe that's not done yet. So do you get the sense that we really are on the verge of being able to sign on a piece of paper? And would that piece of paper be worth much?
As you pointed out in the intro, Abby, I think we've seen this movie before quite a few times, going back to early April. Remember when Trump said an entire civilization will die tonight? And then he said, oh, never mind, we have an agreement on a 2-week ceasefire in Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz. Well, we do have a ceasefire, sort of, which gets violated every day, but we certainly don't have the Strait of Hormuz open. And like every other day, Trump is saying, oh, we have an agreement, a lot of which just seems like he's trying to manipulate the markets and basically talk oil prices down, get stock prices up. But, you have to have 2 people to make an agreement. If the Iranians are saying we don't have an agreement, we may not have an agreement. Now, we eventually may have some kind of deal. But the deal that they're talking about is this memorandum of understanding. It's basically to restore the Strait of Hormuz to where it was before we started the war.
And keep talking.
And keep talking about what happens with the nuclear program. So Trump still has, remember, in 2018, Trump pulled out of President Obama's nuclear accord saying he was going to negotiate something much better. He still hasn't done it. He still has not gotten the Iranians to agree to greater limits on their nuclear program than what President Obama had. And in the meantime, the Iranians have closed the Strait of Hormuz, and this war has triggered the greatest energy crisis on record. So this is not any kind of victory. Trump is just trying to figure out how to escape this quagmire in which he has ensnared the entire world.
Carla?
Yeah, well, I think that Trump actually has done a lot more than President Obama did regarding the nuclear program, because he bomb the nuclear program. They do not have the ability to bomb the United States with a nuclear weapon today because of what he did last summer. And now
They
he's
still
working.
have 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, but that JCPOA.
They have a lot more highly enriched uranium now than they had under President Obama.
So it was because, listen, the JCPOA allowed them to slow roll into having nuclear weapons. He is saying
No,
you
it
have to
didn't. It
give
actually
up the
created limits with
centrifuges,
international
you have to give
inspections.
up and they resisted that.
And
They
they're
didn't let
still
the
resisting it. He
inspectors-
doesn't have a
I
deal.
think President Trump, I think, will get to a good place. He's going to start to charge them the money that is frozen. He's going to charge, if they charge a fee to get through the Strait of Hormuz, he's going to take money from the frozen funds. If they
He's gonna
damage
give them
the Middle
money. He's
Eastern
gonna relax
country,
sanctions
he's
as part of
gonna
this deal.
take the frozen funds and give it for repairs to that Middle Eastern country. So he's making, and Scott Bessent said it today, he's doing actual things to make a difference.
Look, I mean, you're referring to what Scott Bessent said. That seems highly speculative, in part because we're not even at a point where we're in a place where we can talk about the frozen funds. Iran doesn't have access to those funds now, and it's not getting them to the table. So siphoning money out of the frozen funds, I'm not sure how that changes their behavior right now. We still don't have a deal. They still have the nuclear material in their possession. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. And the bombing hasn't worked. The cajoling hasn't worked.
I don't think
withholding money hasn't worked. None of it has worked.
I don't think we need to try to fool the American public. Iran was further away from a nuclear weapon under Barack Obama than they are today.
That's not
fact. It's a fact.
It is actually.
It literally is a
Just-
fact.
You're saying
just
so a
factually-
nuclear weapon at this very moment?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
because-
Yeah.
And actually, the
so
bombing.
there is a good reason
the
to believe
bombing.
this.
The bombing that you're referring to does not damage their nuclear program or their uranium, because, as we all know, their uranium is so entrenched that you cannot actually get to it from the air.
I don't think they can get to it
And so what you were saying is just not quite accurate. And the other point is that the American public has gone through a great deal of pain. We've gone through the rise in gas prices, the rise in fertilizer
They were
costs,
higher
the closing,
the
closing of. Can we have a discussion tonight for 1 hour without you mentioning Joe Biden? And the reason I say that is because Joe Biden is not the president of the United States, and the quagmire that you so clearly articulated, it's because of Donald Trump. Let's not forget that. And the blame lies on the plate of the president of the United States. And the fact we're not able to get out of this quagmire is all his fault. And so what I'm simply saying is that Iran has run circles around the president of the United States. We've been here before. Just 3 weeks ago, my friend Scott Jennings was talking about the fact that we were on the brink of an agreement and we were going to get everything we wanted. And you know what? That wasn't true.
We will get everything we want because President Trump is a strong president. I blame every president that came before him
And look,
that didn't stop this program.
My kids are so excited every Christmas, and they get everything they want because Santa brings it.
Let me play what President Trump said about the issue of the enriched uranium as we've been discussing. Listen.
Have you actually secured an agreement on the discussions about the nuclear material and the nuclear negotiations?
Yes,
Has Iran-
conceptually on that, and nobody's getting close to it because it's buried under a mountain.
So I think this begs the question: Are you comfortable, Scott, with a concept of a plan for the enriched uranium that Iran has in its possession?
I mean, the truth is, I don't know, because there's so much going on behind the scenes here that is opaque to everybody sitting out here. It's hard for me to be definitive in a debating posture. I've been very optimistic, as Bakari pointed out, because they've been optimistic. They've been optimistic for, a number of weeks. Today's announcement seemed a little different to me. It felt like a little more immediate than the previous, pronouncements that something might be on the brink. But again, I don't know if that's true or not. This can only end, in my opinion, with him telling the American people definitively, I went in to stop them from ever being able to get a nuclear weapon, and that's how it ends. That's the only way it can end.
Right. I agree with that.
But I also think that we have to internalize that even if they do sign a piece of paper, what's a piece of paper with an Iranian signature worth? Nothing. I mean, so I think an agreement with them is useless absent this. Constant monitoring, being subdued militarily, being subdued economically, and being under constant surveillance from the partners in the region.
That sounds like the JCPOA.
And so that is, well, no, wait, I think the president
That's literally
no,
what it is.
The missing part is the Gulf allies coming to the table keep Iran in check. That's new, and that is a good
I
thing.
do think aspects of it are, to Bakari's point, what the JCPOA was trying to accomplish. I think you do have to give the other part of it, which is there is a sort of military option that Trump has put on the table that was not there before.
Yeah.
So that's real. But on the rest of the allies in the region, I mean, the biggest question is often, is Israel on board? We're close partner. We went into this war with them. Here's what we know about that according to CNN. Israel was not aware of any impending agreement with Iran, a source told CNN, or any approval to an agreement, which appears to contradict Trump's claim on Truth Social. Trump had claimed that a whole list of countries, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Turkey, Pakistan, you name it, they're all on board here. Haven't really heard from any of them, including Israel.
And that's right. And they made clear that they're also not a party to this MOU, which signaling that this is not their thing, showing some distance between them and Trump. And I thought that was interesting because the president did try to make it seem like they were on board somehow, but then yet they're still showing some distance. On the president really, on whether we will hear something definitive from the president about, any sort of agreement, what's in it, et cetera. He was definitive back in the day when he did talk about obliterating the nuclear program. And that's a pretty definitive statement that was not true at the end of the day. And so I do think that all of these announcements, one by one, when you look at that totality of them, the American people just don't trust him anymore. I also do think that the Republican Party generally thought that this would be over within a few weeks. That's what Donald Trump said. That's what he promised them. When I mentioned this could go on until September, I don't know how many Republicans were, that's insane. And now here we are. We are in June. This is not going to be over anytime soon. And you're heading into the midterm elections where there's no relief for the American people. And this will only hurt the Republican Party.
I think the Israel piece is interesting because their interest in this is, they have to live in the neighborhood and they have to live with Hezbollah firing rockets into northern Israel. So they have different equities in this. And so, yes, they've been a good partner here to militarily subdue Iran, but they can't really sign on to an agreement that shackles themselves from being able to defend themselves from these terror proxies. And so I'm not surprised to see them keeping a little distance from this. They simply cannot enter into a deal that would ever prevent them from defending their own homeland.
Iran has said that is one of their red lines.
Remember,
is that the conflict has to end, not just as it relates to Iran, but also as it relates to Hezbollah.
Remember, what's striking to me here is what we're not talking about, which are the objectives that President Trump actually laid out when he launched this war at the end of February. We were talking about one of the objectives, which is to end the nuclear program, which is still very much in play and on the table. But he talked about regime change, about replacing the Iranian regime. He talked about cutting off Iranian support for terrorist proxies like Hezbollah. That's off the table. He talked about ending the Iranian missile program. That's off the table. They still have most of their missiles. They were just firing them in the last few days. So what we're seeing is these incredibly shrinking war objectives where most of the things that Trump said he was going to accomplish, they're not even in play anymore. And the question is, can he even achieve more on the nuclear side than President Obama achieved through negotiations? And it's not clear yet whether that will happen.
And nothing happens in a vacuum. And I think that while we're talking about the conflict, and I actually agree with Scott when it comes to the role that Israel plays and Israel having a right to defend herself, we still have Americans who are here who are paying higher gas prices. We still have Americans who are here. We're talking to farmers in Iowa, which is why Democrats are giddy about races in Iowa right now because of the cost just to have soybeans because fertilizer is so high. The American public is paying a price for what we're doing in Iran right now, and the American public's not dumb. They recognize this and they see the correlation. They may not understand how we get out of it, but they don't understand why we're there, but they understand the pain that they're paying.
I disagree. I think Americans know the reason that we're there. The fact that President Trump is the first U.S. president to say no nuclear weapon, and we're going to take away your ability to attack the United States. He's protecting us. They say death to America every day. So what I think is this is a big deal. What President Trump has done is he's protecting the U.S. people. And the number one responsibility for a U.S. president is to protect the people of the United States.
Was there a
understand
concern? Was there an
it's a little temporary pain for the people.
They don't understand. Have you seen Donald Trump's approval rating?
So
You're probably the only one.
It is painful.
who thinks Donald Trump is doing an amazing job.
I actually think he's going to get the job done. By September, it will not last till September because the Iranians can't hold out. At some point, they're going to have to cap off their wealth.
I would not. I would not put a timeline on it at this point.
It's going to end.
This is going to go on for a while.
Pressure is going to end.
I think it was an immediate issue, not just on the nuclear piece. I mean, look, they've been at war with us for 47 years, but since October the 7th, it's been clear that Iran wants to destabilize the region and execute on their two main goals: death to Israel and death to America. Right. And they were willing to fund terror proxies, and they're willing to, do these things until somebody stands up and punches the bully in the nose. And that's what Donald Trump has done. When it will end, I don't know. I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful, and hope springs eternal. But you cannot let these people run amok the way they have been run amok for the last half century.
Well, remember, last June, Trump bombed the Iranian nuclear program and claimed it had been obliterated. So why do we need another war if he'd already obliterated it a year ago?
Well, public statements are different than private.
Max, thank you very much for being with us.